Hi there, Henry from 911 Virgin, Porsche people in Uxbridge. Welcome to another video. Porsche 911 GT3. Fantastic cars. What are they all about? If you have seen some of our other videos, you remember that Porsche are one of the few manufacturers who produce a pure racing car. You can go to Porsche and they will supply you with a car which is never designed to go on the road. It would be illegal to put it on the road, and it's purely to go racing in. And you pick it up in your car transporter or your trailer, you go off to a circuit and you go racing. And they compete in both national and international series. They also then produce a GT3 road car, which is essentially a race car that's been made a bit more palatable for the road, should you say, but it's still a very driver focused or track focused car, and as such the GT3 it's a car that lots of people will have lots of differing views. The first GT3 came out with the 996. So that was the GT3 Cup cars were produced from 1998 onwards, and they did a couple of versions of the 996 GT3, Gen 1 and Gen 2. They did the same then with the 997 and this version, which is the 991. Again, if you've seen our other videos, I've covered what's with all the strange naming. They're all Porsche 911s, but because everything's a 911 Carrera, you tend to refer to the cars by their internal factory model code, and so in this instance the 991. This car, when it came out, was slightly controversial in that it was only available with Porsche's 7-speed PDK gearbox. The PDK gearbox is a double clutch gearbox. It's a kind of automatic manual gearbox, very clever gearbox. It sort of pre-selects a gear and then it pops you straight into the gear that it's pre-selected, so gear changing is very, very quick, and when you're accelerating you never lose driven power. If you do a manual gear change, you put your foot on the clutch, change gear, take your foot off the clutch and carry on, so your sort of power or acceleration curve is a bit like a sawtooth. You kind of go up, do a gear change, comes back down a bit and then goes back up. The PDK gearbox, it's a constant climb in terms of the speed and power and so on. They didn't produce a manual version of this, and to some people, particularly the GT3, that was a real, it wasn't something they were keen on, and so quite kind of controversial in that sense. When this car came out also, there were some issues with the initial cars that were produced, so much so that Porsche wrote to everybody and said, right, you mustn't use your GT3 because there's problems with it. They went away, they found out what the problems were, they redesigned the engine, and all the early cars had replacement engines, and Porsche issued on this car only, a 10-year guarantee on the engine. They said, we've sorted the problems out, and so you get a 10-year guarantee with the engine. With Porsche, you can also, providing your car hasn't been modified, you can then get extended guarantees. You have your car inspected at Porsche, and up until, I think I'm right in saying, 15 years of age, you can actually put an aftermarket Porsche warranty on your car as well, so you can get absolute assurance. But with these cars, they came with a 10-year engine guarantee, so Porsche were fairly happy that they'd resolved the problems with the engine, and they've kind of put their money where their mouth is to that extent. So engine wise, not that there's kind of really much to see when you open the engine lids up. 3.8 litre, normally aspirated, so not turbocharged, a little bit under 480 horsepower and 196 miles an hour. Didn't quite make 200, but it's not too sluggish. but the fact that it's normally aspirated means very sort of controllable in terms of throttle response. The modern twin turbocharged engines don't tend to suffer too badly from sort of turbo lag, which was always the problem with turbos, but obviously a normally aspirated engine is absolutely on the money in terms of you know, power delivery and being able to control it on the throttle. So obviously rear spoiler on the car, so it's not for the kind of shy retiring wallflowers, but it's a performance orientated car. You know, it's using this to maximize downforce to the rear of the car. You know, other things, it's got no rear seats in the car, so you've only got two seats. This particular car has the Porsche ceramic brakes on it, nearly a £7,000 option at new, and they obviously allow for very harsh braking, and they're resilient, where a steel brake may heat up and you know, when used in anger, the carbon ceramic brakes don't or tend to react in that way, so they'll take a harsher brake. The other big advantage you've got is they're 5 kilos a corner lighter than steel brakes, and that reduces what's called the unsprung weight, and that's quite a significant thing when it comes to the handling of a car. In essence, if you imagine you go over a bump and the wheel is driven upwards over a bump, the momentum needs to be overcome. You need to use the suspension to push the wheel back down onto the tarmac. Well, with the speed, the 5 kilos lighter of saved weight means it's much easier to push the wheel back down, and so you tend to see some quite big gains. I forget the actual number, but you know, a 5 kilo unsprung weight saving is almost worth, you know, 30-40 kilos of sprung weight saving in terms of the benefits from a handling point of view. So unsprung weight is a really crucial thing to keep tabs on if you're trying to make a car which handles well. So the PCCB brakes weren't standard on this car, it was an option, but this particular car has them, so quite a nice thing to have. So this particular car has sort of comfort seats in it rather than the sport seats. Again, if you go on the various forums, you'd be tempted to think that, you know, the sport seats are the best seat in it, and it's what everyone should have. I think on this particular car, actually, because I think someone who specifically wants a kind of track day weapon, I'm not sure they would go for a PDK Gearbox 991 GT3. And so actually, I think the person who buys this car, I think the comfort seats are probably advantageous, because I think they're going to use it kind of in the real world, and they're going to, you know, drive on the road, and the sport seats nice for track days, but not everyone's cup of tea in terms of actually using the car on the road on a daily basis, or you know, for normal kind of road use, even spirited road use. And you get multi-way electric adjustment on these, which is quite nice. So it's a rather dank and moist December afternoon, hopefully bright enough to film this, and it's the 991.1 GT3. This particular car, before we get started, is fitted with the front lift kit, which is quite useful. We've got some speed bumps on the road here, and the car has a very prominent chin spoiler, lower front spoiler, which helps reduce understeer. Whenever you are racing the GT3 Cup cars, you can always tell when your front splitters come off, because you tend to find the car understeers more. But what it does mean is you go over speed humps, and it tends to scrape on the speed humps, or if you go on a ramp into a garage or something. So the front lift kit just raises the front of the car a little bit, helps the spoiler clear, gives you a better ramp angle, and so fitted with it, so quite useful for these speed bumps. So the GT3 is the closest road car to Porsche's race car, their GT3 Cup cars. Porsche have a pretty much unrivaled race history. Probably Ferrari, you might argue, are also kind of equally race based, but they do a lot of their development work, and they're synonymous with racing success across the world and in all sort of sports coupe formats up to 24-hour races. And so given that they're a company that's renowned for race success, their race-focused road car is going to be the one which that top sort of 5% of enthusiasts are going to be wanting to buy. You know, somebody going and buying a Porsche Cayenne or a Macan or a Panamera, they are probably less worried about Porsche's racing pedigree. They benefit from some of the development work, and so within the realms of SUVs or whatever, the Porsche product is always going to be, dare I say, better. But certainly the GT3 is the car which it takes you as close to a race car, and so the real driving enthusiast will want potentially a GT3. And what that does mean is that there is a lot of debate and a lot of opinion when it comes to GT3s. You know, in many respects, you're splitting the atom in terms of, you know, which is best, which is worst. It's a little bit like going into a Michelin star restaurant and saying that the food is no good. Clearly, it's not that they can't cook. It's just that you're debating the last 5% of the food and the taste and so on. And it's much the same with GT3s. The GT3 came out in 98 on the road cars, and so it came out with the 996, and so for the 996, the 997, then this car, the 991, and then the current incarnation, which is the 992. In terms of which is better, which is worse, different people will have different opinions, and I think it depends what you want to do. There are some people who will go and buy a GT3 and they will spend their whole time on the racetrack, on track days with the car. There'll be other owners who will never ever go near a racetrack. They're just going to use the car on the road, and I think those owners want different things out of a car. There's also owners that have different levels of experience. You've got some owners, you know, who actually race cars and who are incredibly capable drivers. You've got other people who quite like the thought of a GT3, but may not be massively familiar with kind of track driving techniques. And so again, that potentially will temper which GT3 is the best car. This 991.1 GT3, for someone who's going to do 20 track days a year, this may not be the version that they would go for. To start with, it's got a 7-speed PDK gearbox, and so to them it's kind of manual or nothing, and so that would immediately sort of take it off the list. But I think for somebody who is more road based, or doesn't necessarily have quite the experience, but still potentially wants to do a couple of track days, I think this car's a consideration. The PDK gearbox is a very quick gearbox, so you've got a PDK Sport button which will change the shift dynamic of the gearbox. It'll hold the gears longer, and it's a kind of harsher, a more race-based gearbox anyway. And so in terms of acceleration, because you just keep your foot to the floor, you don't have to do a manual gear change, you don't get that sawtooth effect where the power comes off when you make your gear change and then goes back on when you take your foot off the clutch. So it's quite flattering in terms of applying the power. The other thing it does on the downshift, Walter Rawls' feet come out and help balance the engine revs to the gear you're in. With race cars, you may have heard a phrase heel and toe, and essentially as you go down the gearbox, that's where you use your heel to apply acceleration to try and increase the engine revs, so that you you can match the engine revs to the gear as you go down the gearbox. Quite a hard thing to do, and if you get it wrong, you end up that your engine does your braking, destabilizes the car, and you end up losing the back end of the car. With this car, that won't happen, because the gearbox does it for you and very quickly comes down the gears as you brake hard, and matches engine revs to the gear you're in. So in that sense, again, it's very flattering. It's quite a clever gearbox. So in terms of the drive of the car, it's a GT3, and I mean, you know, it's a very, very direct drive. It's quite a harsh suspension. This isn't a car that, you know, Porsche are trying to make appeal to everybody. The last video I made was an almost new 992 coupe, current model, and that's a car which is going to appeal to pretty much most people. No one's going to get in it and think, ooh, this is horrible. A GT3, potentially, some people get in and just not like it. It's too crashy, it's too noisy, it's not what they're wanting in a car. And so I think, you know, you have to sort of temper your expectation when you get into a GT3. And as I say, the different incarnations of the GT3 are all subtly different. This particular car, it's for someone, as I say, who potentially isn't going to spend their whole life doing track days. They're going to do a lot of road use in it, but they want a more sporty car. Maybe it's a weekend car which, you know, they're going to take out, and in comparison to their normal weekday car, they want something that's quite different. And this most definitely is different in that it feels, you know, quite aggressive to drive. Gives you very good feedback. You can, you know, hit the apexes very, very well in it, and it gives you, you know, nice feedback in terms of sort of traction and road holding and so on. This isn't an ideal day to be going out, as I say. It's a moist December sort of late afternoon, and so it's slippy, and you know, you're not going to be too aggressive in the driving of the car. But you know, I don't feel kind of worried or scared driving it. You know, it's a perfectly livable with car under these conditions. You know, it's not going to try to kill me, and gives me nice feedback, so it's helping me out. As well as the automatic mode on the gearbox, you do have the paddles, and so you can go manually and you can select the gear you're in. It'll hold that for about 10 seconds and then return me to automatic mode once we've done that. So on hard deceleration, when you're braking, the car's going to match the gear, so that I'm now in second gear, and it's matching it all the way down, and it gives me a very, very nice even braking, because not only have I got my PCC brakes, which are phenomenal, but I've also got the gearbox using engine deceleration, but in a very balanced way. And you would struggle to match that with heel and toe braking with that degree of accuracy. So as I said, if someone is maybe not massively track day experienced, but they want to have a go with their car, this 7-speed PDK gearbox is quite flattering, and it really does help you out. At low revs on these cars, you hear quite a lot of chattering, where the release bearings chattering away, and it's quite normal. When you get in a GT3 Cup car for the first time, you're astounded by how noisy it is with your foot off the clutch. Top speed about 196 miles an hour, so you know, it's not too shabby, and for normal road use, it's more than capable of of kind of keeping up with you know, the natural flow of traffic, so that's useful. So yeah, I always enjoy going out in GT3s. I mean, they are, you know, it's never a bad day in the office when I've got to make a video on one of the GT3 incarnations. You know, there'll be, crikey, you could write whole books in terms of, you know, the differences between one model of GT3 and another, and you know, there will be different people for different cars. This car will not appeal to some potential buyers, but then, to be fair, the model of GT3 that they would advocate may not appeal to the buyer of this car. So, you know, it's not a right and a wrong, and that's kind of quite really a nice thing, really. It's almost like a kind of fine wine. You know, you can go through sampling and trying different kinds of wine, and you can with GT3s as well. Because this car is fitted with the comfort seats, I know a lot of people will talk about you know, you need to have one with sports seats. For, again, the owner of this particular car, because I think, or the buyer of this particular car, because they're potentially not going to be doing, you know, loads and loads of track days all the time, you may find that actually the comfort seat is almost the more desirable option, you know, for normal real world use, you know, particularly as you get more comfortably proportioned yourself as you get older. You know, hopping in and out of the sports seats can be, you know, almost a bit of a bind for people of my advanced years. So, you know, the comfort seats are exactly that. They're sort of a bit more comfortable, and I say for everyday use, you know, it's quite nice. You don't necessarily want to get into a car with, you know, roll cage harnesses, sports seats for day-to-day use. That's not always ideal. But yeah, these comfort seats, you know, they grip well and they're supportive, particularly in the kind of upper shoulder area. They kind of hold you quite well, so you're not sliding about. So, you know, I hope you found that useful. It's, you know, I always enjoy doing GT3 videos. You know, they are a really kind of direct car. It's like cutting with a really sharp scalpel. And so I think if you're, you know, an enthusiast either just of cars in general or of the Porsche brand, the GT3 is always going to be, you know, one of those cars which is going to sort of interest you. And so, you know, it's always nice, you know, when I've got an afternoon out in a GT3, even when it's, you know, a bit wet and a bit cold and horrible as it is today, it's still quite pleasant. But I hope you found that useful. I hope you found it interesting. I'm Henry. We're 911 Virgin, the Porsche people in Uxbridge. Many thanks for watching. Look after yourselves. Goodbye.